Imagine, just for a second, that every single time you broke a promise, it left a mark.
Like a literal physical mark.
Yeah, exactly. Like every time you backed out of a deal or flaked on a commitment or even just casually said, I'll be there, knowing full well you wouldn't,
Oh, wow. That would be brutal.
right? Imagine it left this permanent, visible, jagged tattoo right on your skin, and you just couldn't wash it off.
So you're just walking around broadcasting your unreliability to, like, everyone at the grocery store.
Exactly. You wouldn't just be dealing with a private, guilty conscience anymore. The whole world would see it.
I mean, that forces a complete reevaluation of how we just, casually throw our word around. When the invisible suddenly becomes undeniable like that, the stakes of a simple yes or no completely change.
And that terrifying level of accountability is basically the core of what we're unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a heavy topic.
It really is. So our mission today is to look at this highly philosophical, really spiritually intense essay. It was written by an author named Xu, and it's dated December 13th, 2025.
Right, and it carries this really striking title, Beware of Leaving Scars on the Structure of Life.
Yeah, and the whole premise is that this jagged tattoo scenario I just mentioned, the author argues it isn't some hypothetical thought experiment. It is actually happening to you right now.
The marks are being kept, just not on you physical skin.
Right. And I got to say, the framework of morality presented in this text is like one of the most uncompromising systems I have ever encountered.
Well, absolutely. It is rigid. We're going to explore what these so-called scars actually are and how the author connects breaking a personal promise to, well, global catastrophes.
Which is wild, and we'll get into why this philosophy demands that you keep your word, even if it literally destroys your livelihood.
Yeah, the rules here are intense.
So to start, the essay establishes this ultimate destination right away. It's a realm the text calls Elysium and its fairy islands.
Elysium? It sounds, very utopian.
Yeah, the text describes it as the absolute peak of existence, just a place of supreme beauty. But the barrier to entry is entirely structural,
Right, there's a catch.
a huge catch. The author lays down this inflexible rule that beautiful things are only meant for beautiful lives to enjoy. Which, immediately made me wonder about the mechanism. Like, how does this philosophy actually measure the beauty of a life?
Well, it measures it through something the author calls the antimatter structure.
The antimatter structure.
Yeah. According to the text, a beautiful life is defined strictly as a life that has an antimatter structure completely free of scars.
Free of any scars.
Exactly. That is the singular prerequisite for getting into Elysium.
That specific phrase is just fascinating to me. Antimatter structure. It takes morality, which, we usually treat as this abstract philosophical cloud of good and bad deeds.
Right, like karma or something.
Yeah, exactly. But this gives it a literal architecture. Because in physics, antimatter is the mirror image of standard matter.
So if our physical body is our matter structure,
Then this implies we have an invisible mirror image blueprint that dictates our consciousness. I mean, I tried to picture it. Okay, so instead of a cosmic bouncer checking the IP list of your good deeds, it's more like the source code of an operating system.
oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so a moral failing isn't just a bad grade on a report card. It's literally a corrupted line of code in your structural blueprint.
That is actually a much more accurate way to visualize the author's intent, I think. Because if your source code is corrupted, the program, your spiritual trajectory, it just cannot run in the higher dimensional environment of Elysium
The system will just crash.
or reject you.
Exactly. It simply rejects you. The text insists that our lives are not just flesh and blood and, like, subjective feelings. There is a rigid underlying framework governing our ultimate fate.
Okay, so if the antimatter structure is our metaphysical source code, what specific actions introduce malware into the system?
Right. What's the big threat? Yeah. If I'm listening to this and trying to keep my structure pristine, what is the primary thing I need to avoid?
Well, the text says various negative actions can cause minor damage, sure, but it identifies one supreme offense. The absolute most damaging, catastrophic scar you can inflict on your life structure is caused by something called shichin.
Xixin. That's the Chinese term, right?
Yes. And it roughly translates to breaking trust.
Breaking trust.
Right. It encompasses breaking promises, violating agreements, going back on your given word, or just operating with general untrustworthiness.
It is so interesting to me that out of all the terrible things human beings are capable of, violence, theft, whatever, the ultimate structural sin is just the failure of a promise.
Because Within this framework, a promise is actually an act of creation.
Oh, wait, an act of creation.
Yeah. When you give your word, you are establishing a localized reality. You are literally binding the future to your intention.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
So when you break that promise, you aren't just committing a social faux pas, you are shattering a reality that you brought into existence. It's a fundamental structural collapse.
And the text meticulously charts the blast radius of that collapse, starting right at the microscopic level of the individual. Shufeng claims that a person who strictly keeps their word is essentially magnetized to good fortune.
Magnetize, I love that word for this.
Yeah, they're guided by lucky stars, they make steady progress. But conversely, the individual who commits Shishin is structurally destined for loneliness, isolation, and poverty.
But, and this is a really vital condition the author includes, you have to observe this over the long term.
Right, because our immediate real-world experience definitely contradicts this all the time.
Completely. I mean, we all see scammers, manipulative executives, dishonest politicians.
Who are totally thriving.
Exactly. They break promises constantly and have the massive bank accounts to show for it.
So how does the text explain that?
Well, Shufeng argues that you are only looking at a snapshot, not the entire timeline. The structural damage of Shishin guarantees an eventual collapse.
Like a ticking time bomb in the code.
Yes. A corrupted line of code might not crash the software on day 1 or even day 100, but the instability is there. The arc of an untrustworthy life inevitably bends toward ruin.
Wow. And the author doesn't even stop at the individual. This logic is scaled all the way up to the fate of entire nations.
Oh yeah, the macro level.
Yeah, he says a nation that honors its commitments naturally evolves into a developed, civilized society. But a nation that habitually breaks its word is doomed to descend into chaos and backwardness.
And this is where the text makes a pivot that genuinely stunned me. It takes this concept of national untrustworthiness and applies it to a really specific, sweeping historical claim.
Right, and just to remind you as you're listening, we are strictly reporting on the contents of the essay here, not endorsing these historical or political views. We're just unpacking the author's logic.
Absolutely. We're just looking at the internal mechanics of the text. So Shufeng references the Israelites in the Old and New Testaments of the Bible.
Okay.
And the essay directly links their historical displacement, their thousands of years of wandering, not to complex geopolitics or military conquests, but entirely to the metaphysical consequence of Shishin.
So breaking trust again.
Exactly. The author claims they broke their covenants with the divine, and the resulting scars on their collective antimatter structure manifested physically as historical displacement.
It is a staggering claim because it completely bypasses traditional historical analysis. The author is taking truth-telling, a simple moral virtue, and elevating it into a literal force of physics that governs the rise and fall of civilizations.
Right. In this view, a broken covenant is a tectonic shift. It literally triggers earthquakes in human history.
And the essay pushes that logic even further, right up to the present day. It argues that the intense social conflicts, the institutional chaos, the disorder we are experiencing globally right now, all of it is the direct downstream effect of millions of broken promises.
The collective friction of all those lies.
Yes. And here is the mechanism that really blew my mind. The text asserts that natural climate change and rising global temperatures are a direct result of humanity's broken trust.
I know it sounds totally wild at first, but when you unpack the ontological physics the author is operating under, you can kind of see the internal logic, as radical as it is.
Okay, break that down for me. How exactly does a lie heat up the atmosphere?
Think about what happens when two physical objects grind against each other without any lubrication.
They create friction.
Right, and friction generates what?
Heat.
Exactly. In Shufeng's framework, when millions of human beings are constantly breaking promises, betraying each other, violating contracts, they are creating massive amounts of metaphysical friction.
Oh, wow. The underlying structure of reality is grinding against itself.
Yes. That spiritual friction bleeds over into the physical world. It manifests as societal heat like anger, chaos, war, and literally atmospheric heat.
So the global temperature ticking up is just the physical symptom of a spiritually feverish, untrustworthy species.
That's exactly the argument.
It's like the ultimate butterfly effect. I break a contract in an office building today, and I am microscopically contributing to the warming of the oceans tomorrow.
It assigns an almost unbearable weight to our daily interactions, doesn't it?
It really does. Which naturally brings up a massive practical dilemma. If the consequences of a broken promise are this severe, how does this philosophy handle the messy, predatory reality of the world we actually live in?
It is Probably the most important question to ask when confronted with an absolute rule like this.
Right, because let's ground this in a very real, very painful scenario. Imagine you sign a legally binding contract to go into business with someone. You give your word.
Okay, you're committed.
A month later, you discover this person is just a monster. They're a massive scammer, they're actively embezzling funds, and they're on track to destroy your family's entire livelihood.
A total nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. Now, in our modern legal system, fraud voids a contract. Surely, in this metaphysical system, if I am dealing with a demon who tricked me, the universe gives me a pass to break my promise and walk away.
You would think so. But the author's answer to that exact scenario is incredibly emphatic and unyielding. The text essentially screams, no, no, no. There's zero exception.
Wait, none. Even if it means absolute ruin.
None. The author explicitly states that once you have made a covenant or given your word, you must keep it, regardless of the nature of the other party.
But they lied.
It doesn't matter. Whether the person you are dealing with is lying to you or whether they keep their end of the bargain is entirely their business. Their deceit is scarring their antimatter structure, but your promise is your structure.
The text literally argues that you should prefer to endure catastrophic financial loss, the complete destruction of your reputation, or even physical death, rather than break your promise to a scammer.
Yep, physical death is preferable to the structural scar.
I have to push back on this because that defies every single biological and psychological instinct of self-preservation we possess. It sounds like a mandate to just let yourself be victimized.
It absolutely challenges our modern pragmatic sensibilities. We are wired to protect ourselves, to, find loopholes when we are wronged.
Exactly.
But the author uses a very visceral biological analogy to strip away all our complex justifications. It is the analogy of vomiting.
Okay, that is a jarring comparison. How does vomiting explain letting a scammer ruin you?
So the author asks you to consider the biological reality of vomiting. Vomiting is an event. It is a physical fact. Now, you might have thrown up because you ate spoiled food or because you caught a terrible virus or simply from motion sickness.
Right. The cause could be anything.
Exactly. The cause might be entirely outside of your control. You might be the victim of bad food, but the universe and your body does not care why it happened.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The justification doesn't change the factual reality that the physical event of vomiting occurred.
Wow. Okay, the mechanism makes sense now. The universe doesn't deal in human context. It deals in structural events.
Precisely.
So breaking a promise is breaking a promise. The circumstances surrounding it, the fact that I was maliciously tricked, the fact that the other person is evil, the fact that my family will lose our home, none of those highly emotional, very real human justifications change the metaphysical reality.
The event of the broken word occurred.
The structure cracked, the scar formed.
Exactly. Justification does not prevent the scar. To Shuefeng, truth is not a subjective sliding scale based on who you are dealing with. It is an unyielding mechanic of the universe.
So if you say you will do X and you do not do X, a metaphysical bone breaks.
Yes. It does not matter if doing X was suddenly revealed to be a terrible, self-destructive idea. You made the bed, you lie in it, or you lose your structural integrity.
It requires a complete detachment from the immediate outcomes of the physical world. I mean, if keeping your word leads to your physical death but preserves your antimatter structure, the text views that as a victory.
Because the physical body is temporary, but the structure determines your eternal trajectory toward Elysium.
Which brings us to the ultimate stakes of the essay and what the author expects you, the reader, to do with this incredibly heavy information.
Right, the call to action.
The text openly acknowledges that the current human world is profoundly corrupt. It is saturated with fraud, cunning, endless scheming, and broken promises.
Oh, definitely.
But the warning is clear. If you wish to transition into what the author calls the Humanity 3.0 civilization era, you must completely ignore the behavioral norms of the world around you.
Humanity 3.0, that implies a massive evolutionary upgrade.
It really does. It suggests that our current state, where we constantly renegotiate the truth to protect ourselves, is just an outdated, buggy operating system.
Right, and to be compatible with Humanity 3.0, you have to run on a completely different, rigorously trustworthy code, even when it actively hurts you to do so in the current world.
And this demand for absolute accountability is directed most fiercely at a very specific group of insiders. The text addresses individuals referred to as Chanyuan grasses, who are residing in the second home.
Let's clarify those terms for everyone because they are highly specific to this philosophy.
Yeah, good idea.
So, Chanyuan grasses refers to the dedicated spiritual practitioners, the adherents who have fully committed to this specific path of soul purification.
Okay. And the second home.
The second home refers to the established communities, both spiritual and physical, where these adherents live and attempt to practice these Humanity 3.0 principles together.
Got it. So these are people who have opted into the absolute highest tier of structural accountability.
Precisely. And the author issues a severe warning directly to them. If you break your promises and one day immense suffering falls upon your head as a result, you cannot play the victim. You are forbidden from blaming your spiritual guide. You cannot blame the gods, the Buddhas, or God.
Yeah. There's no externalizing the blame at all.
None. I mean, in a modern culture that frequently encourages us to look for systemic or external factors to explain our personal misfortunes, this text demands a terrifying level of self-accountability.
You brought the suffering upon yourself by scarring your own structure, and you must bear the weight of that punishment alone.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
And the essay closes with this really evocative metaphor to encapsulate this daily struggle. The author compares the mind, or the architecture of the soul, to a spiritual garden.
A garden, I like that.
Yeah. When you harbor deceit, when you break a promise or plot a manipulation, it is not just a fleeting thought. You are literally planting weeds and poisonous grass in that spiritual garden.
And if you allow them to take root, their roots will physically scar the underlying structure.
Exactly. Therefore, the most critical, urgent task of your existence is constantly purifying that space, pulling those weeds before they can settle.
And he also leaves us with a lingering, honestly sobering thought about the nature of that purification. There is a brutal asymmetry between pollution and purification.
The asymmetry of pollution.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most relatable mechanism in the entire essay for me. The text points out that pollution happens in an instant, a single split-second decision. But clearing that pollution, purifying that structural space again, takes a painfully long time.
It's so true.
It's not like spilling wine on a rug. It's more like introducing an invasive species into a delicate ecosystem. It takes one careless moment to release the species, but it takes years of agonizing, meticulous labor to eradicate it and restore the balance.
And even then, the ecosystem might be permanently altered. A scar remains.
Exactly. So let's synthesize the journey we've been on today. We started at the absolute cosmic heights of Elysium's fairy islands, looking at the prerequisite of a flawless antimatter structure.
Right, the VIP lounge of the universe.
We explored how the failure to keep a promise isn't just a social error, but a structural collapse that can dictate the fate of nations and even, supposedly, heat the physical atmosphere.
The friction of a million lies.
Yeah. And we confronted the incredibly demanding, deeply uncomfortable reality that to protect this structure, you must keep your word, even when dealing with those who would exploit you. It is a rigorous, unforgiving philosophy.
It is a profound challenge to our modern pragmatism, for sure. And, if we connect this text's final warning about the asymmetry of pollution back to our daily lives, it mirrors the fundamental fragility of human trust perfectly.
How so?
Think about the relationships in your own life. It takes years of consistent, reliable behavior, thousands of small, kept promises, to build a reputation of absolute reliability.
Oh, absolutely.
But it only takes one split-second lie, one broken commitment when the pressure is on, to completely shatter that architecture of trust. Rebuilding it, if it is even possible, takes a lifetime of labor.
It's an asymmetry we all live with,
Yeah.
whether we realize it or not.
Exactly.
Going forward, the next time you find yourself casually about to agree to something you know you won't do,
Yeah.
or you are tempted to break a deal because it suddenly became inconvenient, ask yourself a very literal question.
Are you willing to permanently alter your source code for this?
Are you willing to stake your antimatter structure on that lie? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it provided you with a powerful new lens through which to view the weight of your own words.
Keep pulling the weeds in your spiritual garden.
And until next time, protect your structure.